Welcome to episode 287 of the Various Subject Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Harmon, joined live from our virtual studio on the internet by my good friend, my colleague, my co-host, and the man who is single-handedly holding down the fort in McLean Hall today, John Scott Sloat.
I don't know if that's true this week. Last week, it was very true that there were not a whole lot of people here. But this week, a lot of people are here, which is surprising. You would expect more vacations this week than last.
Yeah, with the 4th coming up, you would expect people to take them this week.
Yep. But
interesting.
Nope, most people are here this week.
And how's the temperature on the upper floor of McLean there? It can get a little toasty in the summer like this.
So when we have days over like 93, it gets a little unbearable up here, but in the AC just can't keep up. But as long as it stays below 93, it's not too bad.
Okay.
It's very moderately tempted. I can't remember what the temperature is today. Is it high of 85 maybe? So that's right in the wheelhouse of this building. Yeah, 80 feels like 89 right now. Real temp of 81.
I mean, McLean is the oldest building on campus. Well, I mean, it's the original building of the seminary. It's not the longest standing building because Grace bought other buildings that predated it. But
that's correct.
Like Mount Memorial is older, correct? And Westminster are older. Is that right?
That's correct. And I believe so is our new church building that we bought.
Oh, that predates McLean as well?
I believe so. I think it's a 1920s build.
All right. Well,
maybe 30s.
You would know better than I do. All right. Well, if you'd like to contact the show and find out the construction dates of other buildings on campus here at Grace, that'd be a question for John, but you can find us on X at VNSPod. You can email the show, variousandsundarypodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook and on YouTube, and we would love for you to leave a 5-star rating. It'll help more people find the show. I mean, I know we have some new listeners from our recent interview with Matt Smethurst, and so spread the good news, man. Spread it far, spread it wide.
We'd love to see more new listeners.
Yeah, that'd be fun. All right, John. So let's.
We did have one review. I don't know if you realized this.
No.
Now it wasn't a traditional view, but on the YouTube of our show. By the way, are we going to talk about that? It was linked at the Gospel Coalition last week.
I guess we just did, didn't we?
So it got linked on the Gospel Coalition. What day was that? Was that Wednesday?
Yeah, sounds right.
So it got linked there.
Maybe Thursday. Anyway, yeah.
And you went to the YouTube page, and the comment underneath the YouTube page comments, first one said 5 stars.
Hey, there you go.
And so I was appreciative of that. I like that.
Yeah.
I don't know who left it, but I like it.
I don't know. We'll take it. We
absolutely will.
All right, John, let's talk a little sports. Not that there's much going on, right? I mean, we've got your Mets.
Yeah, and a bit of a free fall right now. They can't seem to figure it out. So, I mean, you hit these stretches of every season, right? Where you're losing a bunch, you don't know why, and everybody's bats are cold and the pitchers are giving up a ton of hits.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at right now, in the midst of our season.
Did you come prepared for a sabermetrics segment?
I did not, but what would you like me to talk about?
Well, I think at the end of our last episode, during our last episode, didn't you talk about wins above, was it replacement or average?
Yeah, wins above replacement. Basically, so let me tell you about a website that I don't know that I've ever mentioned to you before. Have you ever been on baseballsavant.com?
No.
Okay. You need to sometime, I don't know if you can do this while you're sitting there, but go on baseballsavant.com and type in any player's name. Current player. So who's a current player that you know?
Goodness. That's a great question. Okay, I've got the website here. Well, let's do your guy Juan Soto.
Okay, so there's a search player name at the top.
Yep.
Click on Juan Soto, type in Juan Soto, and you will see a picture of Juan Soto, some basic statistics there, and
Yep.
then you will see where he grades out as a percentile versus everybody else in a number of sabermetric categories. So the batting one there, underneath batting, so not value, but batting,
Mm-hmm.
X WOBA there, expected weighted on base average. Um, so uh, expected is trying to project it out based on past performance. Weighted tries to remove defense from the equation. So if you remove the defensive ability of somebody, what percentile does Juan Soto get on base at? And if you notice, he's in the 100% percentile for that.
Hmm.
He's
Okay.
the best. Um, and you can see off to the right, he's at 458.
Okay.
You can see expected batting average, expected slugging, average exit velocity, barrel percentage, hard hit rate percentage. Um, Launch LA sweet spot is not about nightclubs in Los Angeles. They're about launch angle sweet spot. How fast does his bat move compared to the rest of the league? How often does he square up a ball? How much does he chase? How often does he miss the ball with strikeout and walk percentage?
So how much do you buy into, I mean, this is moving pretty far into the analytics, which, you know, in one sense became more broadly known through Billy Bean,
Sure.
popularized through the movie Moneyball. Um, and now it feels like every organization to some degree works with these advanced analytics. They to varying degrees.
Yes, the question is now who does it best and who has the best method because they're all doing their own measurements
Right.
and trying to do it best. So really, it's a measurement of how well these individual teams do. So
And this is really the revenge of the math nerds right here.
it really is. For somebody like Juan Soto, I don't know that it's that important, other
Yeah.
than it tells you he's basically Ted Williams reincarnated.
Okay.
Um, but for pitching, it can be interesting because you can get these percentiles uh, based on specific pitches or their spin rate and things like that. And that can be an indicator of possible performance. So there's such a thing, and Baseball Savant doesn't have this, another website does, but they call it Stuff Plus with pitching. And then they
Hmm.
will break it down by pitch. So they grade them usually on an average of 100, so 100 being the average. Uh, how a pitcher throws a ball, throws a four-seam fastball. Does that play at like a 110, so it's 10% better than the average pitcher? Or does it pay like a 90, where it's 10% worse than the average pitcher? You probably want to
Okay.
avoid that pitch. But if your curveball is at like a 135 and your slider's at a 115 and your fastball is at a 105, you want to throw a ton of curveballs because guys are going to have a hard time hitting it.
All right.
Um,
There you go.
that's probably more information than you want to know, but I'll say this for the member of my fantasy baseball team that's listening to our podcast. But I do look at all this stuff in the midst of drafting and
There you go.
how do I pick the right player at the right time with the right spin rate and stuff like that.
Hmm. Okay. So, we're approaching the All-Star break, are we not? Maybe another week?
Yeah, yeah. I think next week or following week.
Okay. Which is just are we to the halfway point yet? The All-Star break is typically like a week or two after the mark.
Yeah, this weekend I believe was the halfway point of the regular season.
Okay.
So
Man,
we're there.
season's so long. So long.
Yeah, yeah. You got to keep it up for a long time.
So long. Goodness. Um,
You watching any baseball these days? You tuning in?
no, no.
What are you watching on like a Saturday evening or a Saturday afternoon?
I've pretty much abandoned sports in terms of watching. I mean, I watched the US Open golf a couple of weekends ago.
Sure, sure.
So I'll watch the majors for golf, but I'm not tuning into the John Deere Classic, you know, random golf tournament that not all the big names are playing.
The
Not tuning.
Capital One Open or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, not tuning into that. No,
You watching
no.
any
So,
tennis?
um, I did watch the finals of the French Open,
Okay.
and I might watch a little bit of Wimbledon,
Okay.
but see, I mean, Wimbledon, you've got the tradition, but here's my problem with Wimbledon. You don't typically have long rallies.
Hmm.
The points are typically very quick because of the grass surface. It's serve, maybe, serve, return, and then like one or two shots, and it's over. One nice thing about the French Open, because it's on clay, and then the US Open, because it's on hard courts, is you get longer rallies. And I think that's more compelling tennis than just, wow, that was an ace. Wow, that was a return winner. Like, you know, when there's only two, three, maybe four back and forth, and that's it, that's not that compelling to me. But when
Yeah.
you get a rally that's like 15, 20, 30 shots where they're moving all across the court and hitting angles and moving up and moving back, that's far more interesting.
Why doesn't that happen on grass? What is it about playing on grass that causes that?
Well, the ball doesn't come up and it skids.
Okay.
So it's harder. So um, the ball moves faster, meaning that especially on clay, clay grabs the ball, slows it down, and pops it up.
Hmm.
Hard courts or like asphalt basically are kind of in between, but it just skids on the grass, so the ball doesn't bounce as high. It's harder to get to, um, and therefore you get fewer rallies, and you get more. Typically, you get people trying to get to the net more often, which also shortens rallies
Hmm.
to do that. But yeah, so I'll probably might watch a little bit of Wimbledon. We'll see. We'll
Okay.
see.
It's a tough time
Um,
for sports. We're sort
it
of
is.
we're in the dog, they put them on in the winter so we can survive here in the Midwest.
That's right. Yeah, though interesting note, my older son, his girlfriend, her family is attending Wimbledon. They're big tennis people.
Really?
Yeah. And
Hmm.
they went to the Australian Open back in January.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
And
Big
that's on a
big
hard court as well, correct?
that is. Yep, that's correct. So, big tennis people.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, we got anything else on sports? I really don't think we do we?
I don't think so. Any trades or anything? I mean, I know James Harden opted out of his contract, right?
We didn't talk about Kevin Durant going to the Rockets, did we?
No, no, I don't think we did.
I mean, that's kind of big news. I mean, again, he's on the back end of his
Yeah, is
career,
it
but
though? That's kind of my question. Is this big news? Kevin Durant going to?
I mean, he's still got some years in him. I mean, he's not certainly on the he's definitely on the back nine of his career, but I think he's probably more like on 14 as opposed to like 17.
Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
So we'll see. I know there's been some talk because of the Achilles injuries in the NBA of talking about shortening the season, but that's just hard to envision with I mean, that's losing money. When you take
Yeah.
away games, you take away money. And I just don't know that that's something the owners are going to be willing to do.
Yeah, I wonder if they could do something to the courts. I just don't know.
I mean, I've heard different theories and opinions, and basically people seem to suggest that it's because of the way players train
Hmm.
and less about because I mean, the NBA's been playing 82 games forever,
Yeah.
so it's not that. So maybe it's the way that they're training. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, I guess the other NBA news is LeBron has apparently talked about wanting to leave LA now. Is that?
Oh, that had not crossed my radar yet.
Yeah, supposedly he's interested in maybe leaving LA.
Where does he want to go?
Well, the word is he wants to go somewhere in the East because the East is a little easier to get through, he thinks.
Interesting. Hmm.
But that doesn't make sense to me because I mean, they just traded for Luka Doncic, like they just
Oh,
added
yeah.
a major piece. I don't
Well, and
know.
they just had an ownership change there. We didn't talk about that. The
Yeah,
Lakers
that's
sold.
true. That's right. For $10 billion.
That just feels not real at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like monopoly money. Like
Yeah.
just a number.
So LeBron's won one in Miami, one in
Uh
Cleveland, two in Miami.
two in Miami, one in Cleveland, one in Los Angeles. He's
So he
got
needs to
four.
win one on the East Coast now, right? I mean, he really needs to cover all his bases.
Well, you're not considering Miami East Coast?
South, South. I suppose it's
I
East
see.
Coast. Yeah.
I see.
Well, then and then Canada, to get the international flavor.
There you go. Yeah. All right. You ready to move on to our main topic?
I suppose so.
All right, John, why don't you introduce it since this was your idea?
Yeah, so a couple of weeks ago, I read this article from the Dispatch. Every Sunday, they come out with a article that talks about religion in some way, shape, or form. And on Father's Day, they came out with an article called "The Man Who Goes Unnoticed." Religious institutions have an important part to play in addressing the crisis of boys and men. And they take some time. It's from Daniel Weiser Jr., who must be a Catholic, right? Based on how the article's written,
Yeah.
got to be a Catholic, and just sort of outlining some of uh, some of the problems and some of the solutions that are out there, and then providing what I think is a pretty compelling solution. So basically, part of the problem is men are struggling, have been for a while, and they lack heroes, they lack role models, and they're finding some of them are finding role not ideal role models. We'll leave it at that, and or I'll leave it
Mhm.
at that for now. And then kind of goes into two role models, talking about Joseph, uh, the husband of Mary in the New Testament, and I'm going to mispronounce this guy's name, but an Austrian fella in World War II who refused to fight for the Nazi Party and was eventually executed by guillotine, which is pretty wild. So yeah, how's that, Doc? Was that a decent
Yeah.
summation of the article here?
You mean Franz Jagerstatter?
Yeah, yeah. Listeners know my propensity to mispronounce names, so I wasn't even going to try.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, I mean, we've talked um about this subject at least indirectly. Oftentimes, I feel like in terms of uh men struggling on the end of friendship,
Yep.
um, as well as even just thinking about you know, m more broadly culturally. And the article begins with basically tracking some of those trends and noting, we've talked a little bit about the vibe shift that's happened with, at least in part connected with Trump's reelection. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think that um, this was a different take on that for sure in terms of highlighting again those sort of broader cultural struggles, um, which you know I can't remember how much we've talked about this in terms of when you constantly treat, when the culture treats masculinity as toxic.
Yeah.
And again, that's a vague thing and ill-defined oftentimes, but sometimes any expressions of masculinity are viewed as toxic.
Yeah.
And when that happens, that has an effect on men's self-perception, has an effect on their willingness to take risks, to take initiative, to even pursue women, those sorts of things for marriage and that kind of stuff. Like, and so now it feels like the culture has finally come around to maybe we've overdone this bashing of men, and maybe we need to do something about helping them, not
Yeah.
just saying everything about men is toxic and any traditionally male attributes of like initiative and aggression and being proactive and protective and those sorts of things are inherently awful and we should, criticize them at every chance.
Yeah. When was the first time you kind of went, maybe maybe men are struggling more than maybe you originally thought? Was there a time where you went where it sort of crystallized for you and you saw like, oh, I think men are really struggling?
Well, I mean, my observations are going to be mostly driven by my interactions with college students and seminary students.
Yeah.
And I think for me, initially, I'd say probably looking at COVID, like post COVID,
Hmm.
um, and then feeling like, all right, while it's true that both men and women are having issues, it seems like men are even more so kind of behind the curve when it comes to um, a lot of these different sort of cultural and social and emotional maturity benchmarks. Um, and honestly, seeing it even just in the raw numbers of students, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
the most universities have had more women than men for some time now, but that disparity is increasing, not decreasing. So those are some of the things that kind of got it onto my radar. What about you?
I mean, so the article mentions Richard Reeves, and he has a book. I think Why the Boys Are Not All Right. Don't quote me on that title, but I'm pretty sure he has a book by that title. And I just remember when he was doing 2021, sort of the podcast circuit, and talking about how education in and of itself is geared toward women. That men have a tendency to start education way too early when they're not emotionally mature enough. Um, so there was that, and yeah, I think similarly, it felt like working with students, women knew what they wanted in college students, even at a place like Grace, like it was just clear, like
Hmm.
crystallized for them. This is, and men just seemed to be floating through
Yeah.
their college experience. So yeah, I don't know if I would have put my finger on it at that time in like 2015, 2016, but looking back, it was definitely like when I was working in the dorm, it was very much like I cannot get guys to come out of their rooms and stop playing video games for anything. Like I just didn't know how to do it. And so but if I left my office door open in Kent, I'd have, women who lived in the dorm swinging by and saying hello or coming to ask me a question, and the guys just very rarely. Some of them I didn't see at
Yeah.
all. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was probably the first time I was really aware of it.
Yeah. And I think that um, part of what also has made that stand out to me is at the same time having a small number of young men in this generation be more proactive about reaching out for mentoring from me as an older guy,
Yeah.
that the ones that were more self-aware and more proactive were like, I need help figuring out my life.
Hmm.
Like, and this was even the case with, you know, it makes sense when you think it, well, some of these guys maybe didn't have great father figures or have a strong father presence in their life, but this was even true with some guys who, from everything I could tell, had good relationships with their dads. They had dads that were involved and,
Yeah.
wise and gave counsel and that kind of thing. Um, which, is it's I mean, in some senses I can put myself in those shoes because when I was a college student, I was pretty proactive about looking for mentoring from older guys to give me insight and wisdom and counsel. And looking back, that was just so pivotal in my spiritual growth, just my growth as a person in general. Um, and how, I can identify specific guys who helped me grow as a human being and filled in gaps that had been left by others. So,
Yeah. In the article, they outline the lack of fathers that are out there. And you kind of touched on it there more pointedly. Do you see that as a big, I mean, I see that as a big problem, but how big is that problem in your mind?
well, I think it's huge. And I think, um, you know, I think it hits on a spiritual issue because I think God designed the family. I mean, he talks about his relationship with his people as both, husband and wife, but also as father and child. And so, inevitably, when a person reads in the Bible that God is a father, it's it's going to be very difficult for them to not attribute certain attributes of their own earthly father to God as father, even if they're completely wrong.
Mm,
And I think that, if you have an absentee father or if you have an abusive father, uh, you're you're going to have to work through and wrestle with God is not like that. But even once you get through that, you still, I think, need embodied real human beings to fill in that gap in your life at some level. I mean, we see this on the college campus all the time in terms of, young men coming in with not great relationships with their fathers and yeah, it causes all sorts of problems.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, to me the stat that was just mind-blowing, let me see if I can find it.
Was it the percentage of the different
Of
races with fathers?
yes.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
underneath the disappearing father in the manosphere. I think that's pretty early in the article. Yeah.
Yeah, was it 50% of African American
Yes.
boys don't have a father figure present in their
It's
homes,
actually
essentially?
half of black children
Black
grow.
children, not just boys. Okay.
Hmm. 29% of Hispanics. Uh, and then um, the, I believe it was white families is much better, but I can't find the from 12 to 20% of fatherlessness. So fatherlessness is
Yeah.
on the rise in virtually all demographics, racial demographics.
Yeah. And eh, there are a lot of, I think, complex factors that go into that. But I do think that one of those factors is, and people might misunderstand me when I say this, but when there is federal um, support for single moms, which I'm not saying is a bad thing in and of itself, but
Sure.
you know, that can contribute, I think, to um, women who decide I'm just going to go it on my own and try to raise this kid by myself. And again, there's so many factors that go into that, and I'm not saying we shouldn't be, giving government aid to single moms in need. I'm not saying that. But, as is often the case, something that is well intentioned can have unintended consequences that are not good. And I
Yeah.
think that is one of them.
Mm.
So, yeah, this article goes on to talk about you know, young men's need for heroes, and that's, it's set against the backdrop of some young men being a little too enamored with online influencers that are not great examples.
Yeah.
Um, but connected with this, don't you think, like, you and I have both seen how there is this gravitational pull among a certain type of guy, college age guy, even high school age guy, that suddenly becomes enamored of. Can you hear that in the background?
No, no, no.
Okay, good.
What's going
There's a
on?
chainsaw going on in the background of my
Oh,
outside
no,
my window.
can't hear it at
Okay,
all.
that's amazing. This is a great microphone then. Okay. Anyway, um, I'll fight through the personal distraction.
Yeah.
Uh, that there's a certain type of guy that seems to be attracted to the like online influencer or even like the Doug Wilson type of like, I'm going to say it like it is, and kind of a bit of a strutting kind of machismo kind of approach to the Christian life.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel like that's in part trying to fill that gap. Um, and I think it also is in part, though, about a certain way of approaching cultural engagement where people have been so hesitant to say clear things and say, no, that's wrong. That's unhelpful. That's sinful. That will lead to destruction. Instead, it's, well, that's not ideal, but the sort of mealy mouthed cultural engagement that's afraid to say anything that might offend. I think some people are attracted the other direction to say, that's not attracted to me, but somebody saying that's sinful and that person's going to burn in hell for it suddenly is like, well, that guy's a straight shooter.
Yeah.
I'm interested
Yeah.
in him.
I mean, for me, that was uh when I was in college and seminary, I think Mark Driscoll was a really attractive figure.
Yeah.
Um, because he shot straight. That was part of it and he said it almost like a stand-up comedian, but a
Yeah.
derogatory one, right? That's
Yeah.
sort of like attacking you. Um, but it also, at the same time, at least for me, and also I'll speak for myself, right, affirmed a lot of things that I had heard my whole life. It was just couched differently.
Yeah.
Um, what sort of killed that was his personal life. Sort of
Hmm.
his personal character and ethic.
Yep.
I think what's a little unique in this moment is you have sort of that straight shooter telling you exactly, maybe not exactly what you should hear or should hear, but when their personal ethic is hot garbage, that seems to be a feature, not a bug for some men.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's a problem.
Yeah. For sure. For sure. So let's talk what can be done about this. I mean, the article makes some suggestions using examples of Joseph, and this is where the Catholic
Oh, the Catholic
background
really comes out here. Yeah.
comes out for sure, presenting Joseph as in the earthly father of well, I mean, do you call him the what do you call him? He's not the adopted father. I mean, like,
That's what they call him in the article, the earthly
yeah,
father who adopted Jesus.
there you go. Let's go with that.
That's probably a
Which,
little too modern of an understanding,
yeah,
but there was adoption.
but
But yeah.
yeah. So, he's doing a lot of filling in gaps since basically we know very little
Yeah.
about Joseph, period, other than his lineage. And then he talks about a Catholic farmer,
Yeah,
an
Catholic
Austrian
Austrian
farmer,
farm.
yeah, for refusing to fight with the Nazis.
Yep.
So, again, I don't have any necessarily issue with those models. I think what it does, though, and this is where I want to focus the remaining bit of our conversation on this, is the men and women, but I think men especially, were were made to have purpose. And when men don't feel like they have purpose, that's when they just sort of wander off into anything and everything, or they go
Yeah.
looking for purpose in the wrong places. And so I guess part of the question is in the church, how can we um how can we help? How can we point young men to purpose, and how can we disciple them away from these harmful influences?
Yeah. That's a really big question. And I'll tell you what comes to mind first of all. Okay.
Okay.
So this may not be the best solution. Um, I think for a long time, uh, youth group was designed to communicate to young men like, hey, come have fun. And basically, I don't know, but sometimes I viewed my own youth group experiences like, oh, this is a Christian version of a TV show with a swear word in it that I can't say. And this is about being stupid, being juvenile, being youthful, with a little Jesus sprinkled in, a little
Hmm.
lesson here. Um, and I think talking about purpose and talking about, particularly with young men and instilling in them early, like, hey, greatness in life is not, being this physically fit guy who speaks his mind at all times and drives a sports car,
Hmm.
like, right?
Yeah.
Um, Talking about purpose, talking about legacy early, talking
Hmm.
about sort of what they talk about with Saint Joseph here, right? Or Joseph. I'll just call him Joseph. I'm a Protestant. Um,
Yeah.
right? Hey, I'm gonna take my family in the middle of the night and get the heck out of here because that's what's best for my family, right? Out of
Hmm.
Bethlehem. Or, hey, now's the time we need to return. Let me work a job and love my family really, really well. Uh, in not a loud way or not a in your face way, but in sort of this quiet way. And then I think Franz, the other guy, is sort of the other end of that, like when the moment calls for it, stepping up
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
the ability to be the lone voice when the situation calls for it. Not on all things, right? Because
Yeah.
no one likes the guy that's the lone voice on every single issue.
Yeah. The well actually guy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I mean, I think it starts in youth group and getting more serious about youth group and discipleship of the whole person, certainly toward the gospel, certainly toward the Christian
Hmm.
faith, but also thinking about our lives as not about self-fulfillment, but about service to others.
Yeah. To build on that, I would say um, youth group's not the only place for that. I think pastors need to preach and apply directly the text to young men,
Yeah,
um, and help them. Again, not to exclude young women, like both young men and young women. Um, but I just keep coming back to. Um, I think I mentioned this on the pod a while ago. My wife's commencement speech at Lakeland Christian Academy, where she challenged the students to live a life of essentially ordinary faithfulness.
yeah,
Like this is what greatness looks like. Greatness looks like being a faithful spouse, a faithful parent, a good employee, a faithful member of a local church, loving your neighbor well, and redefining what we think of as greatness. And um, you know, thinking in those terms, and that there is purpose in that. There is ultimate
absolutely.
purpose in that because God made it that way. And that these other things, while they can be good or bad, depending on context, there's nothing that when you think about the whole idea of being made in God's image, it's connected to having purpose, to living out our identity as God's image bearers in the context of the family, in the context of the church, in the context of our communities, and helping young men realize lasting satisfaction comes from ultimately being one with Christ and being a faithful disciple in whatever context God places you in.
Yeah. I think that's a good final word. I have a meeting in 10 minutes. So, shall we move on to this day?
Let's do it.
All right. This day in sports history. Today that this drops is July 1st.
Yep.
Happy month named after a tyrant, Doc.
Hey, I was born in this month, so step lightly.
Yeah. I mean, I'm talking about Julius Caesar, not yourself. You were no tyrant.
That's good. I assumed you were not talking about me, but good to
Yeah.
clarify.
Okay. 1904. Is that the third summer Olympic Games?
Yes.
I
Yes.
guess the modern Olympic Games. I guess do
Yeah.
we start that in like the late 1800s then?
1896, Athens.
Really? Uh, Modern Olympic Games open in St. Louis, the first held in the United States. I never would have guessed it would have been St. Louis. I would have picked like a Chicago or a New York or something like that.
I'm going to be honest, and this might offend any listeners we have in the St. Louis area. I kind of forget about St. Louis. Like when I think about cities in the United States,
Yeah.
like you think of the big three, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and then after that, I start thinking of like, well, I mean, there's Dallas or Seattle or like it
Atlanta,
would
Houston. Yeah.
yeah, it would take me a long time to get to St. Louis. I just kind of forget about it.
You know, my wife's from St. Louis.
I do know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Will she be offended by that comment?
I don't think so.
But her parents might. And I know your father-in-law does listen, does he not? At least
I think they
occasionally.
both listen. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
My father, but they're more Columbus. They've always been Columbus, Ohio people.
Well,
They're
that's
both
that's a
Ohio State
far.
grads. So,
Yeah,
I
of
mean,
course. Well, there you go. There you go.
anyway,
Anyway,
1916, Pittsburgh shortstop Honus Wagner at 42, I assume that's years and four
yeah,
months, uh, connects at Cincinnati to become the oldest to hit an inside the park home run. Wow. The Pirates beat the Reds 2-1.
that's moving for a 42-year-old.
That is moving.
Where does that fit on the baseball analytics?
Well, I mean, I imagine that was not predicted.
Yeah.
1941, Yankees outfielder Joe DiMaggio, say it ain't so, on his way to record 56, ties
To a
Will
to a record 56.
to a record 56, excuse me, ties Willie Keeler's 44-game MLB hit streak in a 9-2 win over the Red Sox at Yankee Stadium.
Okay.
1982, Cal Ripken Jr. makes the first of his record 2,216 consecutive MLB starts at shortstop for the Baltimore Orioles. That's
That's a
impressive.
long streak, yes.
Now, was that at shortstop or was that consecutive games played?
Uh that's a good question.
I know he holds the consecutive games played because I remember that,
Yeah.
and this would have started 6 years before I was born.
I think that's for shortstop.
Wow. 1997, Nevada Athletic Commission suspends Mike Tyson indefinitely and withholds $20 million purse for biting Evander Holyfield's ear during their heavyweight title fight on the 28th of June. Wow, it did not take them long to do that,
No.
huh? I guess when you have 20 million, it's a quick decision.
Yeah.
Uh, let's see here. Last one, 2018. NBA superstar LeBron James agrees to a 4-year, $154 million deal with the Lakers, moving from Cleveland.
So who do you like out of that, John?
Oh, I probably like Horace Wagner.
You mean
Honus,
Honus?
Honus, Honus. Sorry. Honus Wagner is probably the spot I want to go.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree. one thing you liked.
All right. I just finished a sci-fi novel, the first in a trilogy. This one is called Wool. Have you heard of this sci-fi
I have
novel?
not. No.
Yeah, so they made it into a Apple TV show called Silo. Um, and
Hmm.
basically it takes place in sort of a nuclear waste future where they put a silo deep into the ground and have to control the population and all these things. And it's about life inside this silo underground. They don't know what year it is. They don't know if it's really toxic outside or if they can go outside.
Wait, is it on Hulu?
Apple TV.
Okay, because there's a similar show on Hulu that I watched the first season. Anyway, I can be a sucker for some of the kind of post-apocalyptic stuff.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of the second book right now, and it is about the origins of this silo and how it came to
Okay,
be and stuff like that. So it goes
interesting.
back in time, so it doesn't move forward. It's a little interesting.
Okay. Uh, so I'm gonna go with right before we recorded, I was presenting a paper virtually at the Tyndale Fellowship Conference in England. I was supposed to be there in person, but you know, a detached retina and two eye procedures will make it difficult to fly. So,
Sure.
uh, but I presented my paper virtually and got some good interaction, and then stuck around to listen to the person presenting after me, who was interacting with some of the other stuff I'd written on typology, and so I enjoyed that as much as I can enjoy doing it virtually as opposed to being in the room. So,
Sure.
yeah,
Makes
that was
sense.
fun. That was fun. And that is my one thing I liked. All right, John, we got to get out of here. At least you got to get out of here.
I do. Yeah, I got a meeting.
So, we talked about the Mets and advanced baseball analytics. We talked about The Man Who Goes Unnoticed. We talked about Honus Wagner. We talked about wool, not the fabric, the book.
Hmm.
And we talked about me presenting at the Tyndale Fellowship Conference. So I think by definition, we have covered our various and sundry topics. And so all that's left to say is, until next time, the Lord bless y'all real good.
Later.